Welcome to another episode of the On the Water Podcast. I'm Jimmy Fee. I've got the one and only Anthony DeCicci with me, and we're going to be talking about the Northeast's third best bottom fish.
Ooh, third best, huh, Jim?
I think that's it's. I can't think of one that would be above it in terms of.
I can.
No. I mean, I know two. We're talking about the black sea bass. I don't think Tog and Fluke are definitely battling for number one. So it's fighting for third place.
No, it's fighting for fourth place. Tog and Fluke are battling for two. The ultimate unicorn in the Atlantic halibut is by far the best bottom fish.
Well, okay. Within reasonable chance of targeting and catching.
I'm going to catch one.
Well, okay.
Let's move on to sea bass, Jim.
So right now, by the time this hits, we'll be about a week and a half into the sea bass season for New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. New Yorkers have to wait a little bit longer for their sea bass season to start. But Anthony and I got out, I guess, about 3 or 4 days into the sea bass season. We were with Captain Anthony Forte, and tell us about that trip a little bit, man.
It was fun. I mean, any chance to get out, near the sea bass opener is a welcome one. Going back, it has been one of my favorite fish to target because you can just get on them early before work, make it into work. They're absolutely delicious table fare, and they're fun. And I don't know what it was, but they became kind of like my spirit fish, where I've never started fishing for a species and just, I don't know, maybe lucked into catching the upper echelon size of that species and having a knack for it and doing it with consistency. So
I want to get back to that later on, but first I just want to talk about, the sea bass opener here in Massachusetts is usually around mid-May. This year it was May 18th, always is on a Saturday. And that is one of the last great opening days we have. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, Massachusetts doesn't have an opening trout day. Back in Pennsylvania, I would wait for the opening day of trout season. That was something you would get excited about. Massachusetts, the only real one I can think, because the fluke one kind of comes in with a whimper. Nobody's looking forward to that first day of fluke season. Early. Yeah, New Jersey, it's a different story. Yeah, New York, it's a different story. But is
haddock still April 15th?
April 1st. So haddock's April 1st. They bumped it up to accommodate the cod season, which is they open it on April 1st. You can keep one cod, so they just moved up haddock. So you have a reason to go out for that codfish. That one gets a little bit of play, but I think I've been out for, a whole bunch of opening days for black sea bass, and that has that festival atmosphere. You see a big fleet forming in Buzzards Bay and in Vineyard Sound. You have, I'm out in the kayak. You have a ton of kayak guys out there. So it's a great opening day. And we were out there. We weren't out on the opener. We went out a couple days after fishing in Vineyard Sound, and, man, it's a pretty reliable limit that you can get of black sea bass. You're allowed to keep 4 fish greater than 16.5 inches now in Massachusetts. In Jersey, where I'm seeing tons of reports right now of guys going out and limiting out, they can keep 10. But they've got a little bit of a shorter black sea bass season, and there's also different, states get different allocations. So
yeah, and Rhode Island is still really late, right?
Rhode Island, you can keep 2 right now, and then it bumps up to 3. So it's a fish that I'm seeing more people travel for. They'll come to Massachusetts because we have kind of a unique black sea bass fishery here where they're in shallow water early in the season, and you can target them with light tackle. New Jersey, you're more on the artificial reefs and wrecks. But we hit a wreck, and the fishing was pretty good. We started out, we had a little hubris early on where we set our own size limit at 20 inches. So we're throwing back some beautiful fish. Although I wasn't immediately on board with that. I wanted to get the limit done and go striper fishing. But I would hand you were standing next to the cooler, and I remember handing you a beautiful 18-inch sea bass. I was like, hey, could you bleed that and toss that in there?
No problem.
You looked at it and just tossed it over the side. You go, nothing under 20. So we sea bass fished for probably another hour and a half than we had to finally fill out that limit. But no, it was worth it. A lot of fun. And then we switched over to striper fishing.
That was an awesome trip. So huge thanks to Anthony Forte, Fishing with Forte on the Instagrams. But he's a lot of fun to fish with. That was actually my first time fishing with him. We've talked plenty of fishing, and we've always kind of buddied up at the shows and stuff. He's just a character. He's an awesome dude to fish with.
It's on his boat. He has Frank Reynolds in the sea deck. Frank Reynolds from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and one of the lines is Frank Reynolds was like trying to sell guns in the show and said, anyways, I started blasting, but he switched it. He's got Frank Reynolds with 2 rods saying, anyways, I started casting.
Awesome.
And as a big Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan, I love that. Any boat that's got that's pretty awesome, dude. Everglades Boats is an industry leader in premium offshore fishing boats. Founded in 1997 by boating industry legend and former Boston Whaler executive Bob Dougherty, Everglades revolutionized the boat building industry with the invention of the RAMCAP process for one-piece unsinkable hulls. Respected for its renowned hull ride, Everglades builds center console and hybrid boats from 25 to 45 feet that make a statement about the status and savvy of their owner. Everglades has received numerous industry awards and achieved an unparalleled reputation for superior safety, performance, and quality. For more information about Everglades Boats, stop by your local dealer or visit evergladesboats.com. Everglades Boats, built for beyond. So I want to, before we go into like tactics and techniques, here's some facts about the black sea bass. What do you got for me, Cheech? What do you know about them?
Well, they are a protogenous hermaphrodite, which basically means that they start out as females and they have the ability to switch to male. If there isn't enough males in that spawning group, they can make that switch, which is pretty wild if you think about it.
Yeah, you see that in a lot of I think grouper species and species where they kind of do that, where they're almost all born as female, and then they switch. It usually happens, I think, in the fall of the year because they're spring spawners. Winter, depending on where they are in the range, winter or spring spawners. And they're not entirely sure why this happens, but the hypothesis is that if there's a scarcity of males in the spawning group, some of the females then go and switch over. But the sea bass have kind of an interesting spawning behavior where with striped bass, like you have one big female and then smaller males will then spawn with that female, like nudge it toward the surface to release the eggs. With sea bass, it's the opposite. You have one male that has a group of females and will aggressively defend that territory with the females. Yeah, you can call it that if you want.
All right.
So that's what I learned about females. And when they spawn, the male sea bass take on a brilliant coloration. They're in their spawning colors right now. So if you catch them in the middle of the winter or late in the summer, they're kind of a flat, kind of brownish black color, with some white, white in the fins, some white filaments on the tails. But what do they look like in the spring?
They have like a very structured look to them at different times of the season. Females are usually like a brown or a gray with some black spots, but very dark scales with white spots and white markings on their fins is one look that you'll get. Then as they get a little older, you'll start to see this kind of striped pattern where there'll be some of that vibrant blue down the scales, on the tips of the scales and stuff, still have those white markings on the fins. And when they're in full spawn, they're stunning. I mean, they have this almost iridescent, turquoise, bluish green, and everyone looks a little different. And the males have big humps on their heads, and that usually colors in really well. And they'll still have that striped pattern down the body of each of their sides, I guess crossways to their lateral line, and their fins. I've seen them with green tips, like they had frosted tips, like back in the early 90s. That was kind of cool. They have had white. They have white markings on the tips of their tails and their filaments, off the tail and their fins. So they're just gorgeous fish.
Yeah, they're one of the cooler looking fish you have here when you get the big male in the spawning colors. And that's one of the fish that I really want to mount.
Yeah.
I want to have a black sea bass mount. I don't know where I set the bar though. I think I want to say 6 pounds, but that's a really big sea bass. You've got a sea bass mount.
Yeah.
Who did that for you?
Jeff Henderson from Catch and Release Artistry, I believe. He's out of the Blackstone, Rhode Island area. He does amazing work. I think I was the first sea bass that he had painted, but he's so selective. He refused 3 molds, basically blanks, from different vendors where he's like, no, this isn't going to work for me, until he's calls me up. He's like, I got the mold. This one's spot on. And he painted it up in its full, spawn colors, and it was just awesome.
So yours is kind of a scene. Like you're Taxidermy. It's not just like
Yeah,
it's not on the wall.
It's called a
Yeah.
pedestal mount. So basically, he built up a paper mache rock pile, and it's on a flat piece of wood.
It's not paper mache, is it?
I think so. I'm really not sure. I don't know. I haven't cut it open.
I think paper mache is like the super fragile stuff. You like put the glue over the newspaper.
No, I'm pretty sure it's paper mache, but we're getting hung up in the details. We're in the weeds here, but it's basically a flat piece of like plywood that's cut out in like a cool shape with no hard edges. He's got some like marine rope going around the outside, and then basically sand glued onto it with shells and some like fake seaweed and stuff like you'd find in a fish tank. And there's a couple blue crabs that one of them's in like the rock crevice and one of them's out in front of the fish. And the fish is elevated. Basically, it has a post that goes up into the blank of the mount. And the fish is angled down looking a blue crab, which is in full defense mode, ready to get eaten by that black sea bass. And it's a great mount. I love it.
It's a tremendous mount, man. How many mounts do you have?
Of fish that I've caught, I have my first giant's tail in a fiberglass mount that's kind of cut at an angle, hanging from a rope. I have a 58-pound mahi on the wall from Costa Rica. That thing was giant. And I have that sea bass, and then I inherited one of my dad's. I inherited two of his mounts, but one of them made it into the dumpster because it was just real old. It was like a 23.5 pound bluefish, and then I have like an 11-pound bonefish that he caught down in the Keys.
Did he mount the 60? He caught a 60-pound striper, right?
Yes, but that mount was in an aquarium in Hull and on Nantasket Beach that no longer exists, and I don't know where that mount is today.
There can't be many people like your dad caught a 1,000-pound bluefin and a 60-pound striper, and that's got to be such and a 23-pound
bluefish.
That's there can't be many people in that category there.
And I don't even know what his high water mark was on fluke, but when they used to jig wire back in the day, he'd talk about teen size fluke, which just add that to the mix.
That's wild,
crazy. He used to always say, "I've forgotten more than you'll ever know." And judging by his high water marks, I don't think I'll beat any of them. Although I was attached to a tuna bigger than his that he so gracefully reminded me of on his deathbed, which was still one of my funniest stories. But back to the sea bass, I absolutely go nuts for them. And since I've kind of been in a gap in my boat ownership, having a boat, I guess, I haven't found as many people that are as passionate about looking for the big ones as opposed to making a quick limit and going on to something else.
It's the type of fishing I fall into that category where I would like to catch big sea bass, but I'd also like to catch
other things,
a quick limit, and then go do something else. And that's because this goes back to me saying they're the Northeast's third best bottom fish.
Yeah.
With fluke and with tog, you feel like you can target bigger ones. And you're going to tell me I'm wrong here, and that's what I want you to do. But with sea bass, it feels like you just go out and you catch whatever's there. It's like bluefish or it's like albies, whatever size you get into. You move around to find a larger class of fish, the keeper size fish. But it seems it's less straightforward than with a fluke. I'm going to fish a 12-inch strip bait. I'm going to sit there and ignore all the short taps until one goes and thumps on it. Sea bass fishing just doesn't have that as much variation until somebody like you gets into it and then really drills down on looking for that bigger sea bass.
Yeah, I think it kind of happened by accident. I love to cook. I obviously love to eat, which it's pretty obvious. But sea bass they're just fantastic. They're so versatile to cook with. You can do so many different ways, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I think that just loving the meat, right? Kind of stumbled into catching some really big ones early on, and I'm like, wow, these bigger sea bass are built different. They look different. They fight different, and I don't know. I think I just kind of stumbled into some random puzzle pieces that were always consistent with the bigger fish that started setting off some light bulbs where I was like, okay. And I think the first giant that I caught was actually on a trip with On the Water Zone Andy Nebraski. And we had made plans to do a quick mission. Again, just going out there to make a quick limit, get back in so we didn't get in too much trouble at home, and, process some fish and fill some freezer bags with some fresh stuff that holds up well in the freezer, and have some good eats, heading into the rest of the weekend or whatever. So we get down to the boat, and something was left on by a mechanic. I do not miss having a boat. Something was left on by the mechanic that was fixing something. My battery switch. I came to the boat, dead batteries. I called the service manager, who happened to be a friend of mine, who was working at Bosun's Marine at the time. And he goes, "Oh, dude, I'm sorry." It's like 5 a.m. maybe. And he goes, "Dude, keys are in my cup holder. Just take mine." So I jump in his whaler, and me and Andy go out. He saved our bacon, and it ended up, we ended up heading down, to the grounds off of Katuitt that I liked. And there was this one massive rock that the tide was better at in that area. I'm like, let's go start there, and then we'll slide into some of the wrecks and stuff. And we pull up to the spot, and we're fishing. And I had a spro bucktail with a long teaser, and I was just kind of bouncing that around the rocks, kind of swimming it, and I hooked a fish, and immediately, it's spring, it's that side of town, it's like bluefish, because, peel and drag and just bulldogging a little bit, I'm like, it's a bluefish. And when I ever saw that it was a sea bass, I was like, that's the biggest sea bass I've ever seen. It was, 25.5 inches long. And unfortunately, we already had our limit. It was quick work that morning, and I ended up submitting it for a catch and release entry that ended up holding up all season long. I want to say that was within a week of opening day, so the rest of the season was behind it, and it held on by a good couple inches, and to date, that was my heaviest sea bass.
Is that the one mounted?
So the mount was the dimensions of that fish, but that fish was very, very dark. Not as dark as my second biggest, but I wanted kind of the spawning colors on it, so I kind of had him do a custom paint job on it with a fish that I really loved the pattern on. So I sent him the dimensions of that big fish, and I gave him a picture and said, "Hey, kind of match this picture."
So in some ways, that's kind of representative of a couple different fish.
Yeah, exactly. So, I started kind of keying in on longer profiles, because with sea bass, they're a schooling fish, right? They're a schooling fish, and I started playing with the idea of I want to cull out bigger fish from the biomass of fish that I found, so that I could do things like fill a limit with only 20-inch plus fish. We used to have a rule on the boat where you get out there and it's all right, we're starting at 20 inches. And we would go, and it would be I'd have my counter going and be all right, we're 40% of our limit. Let's bump it up to 21 inches. And then would end the day usually with hey, there's 3 spots left, nothing under 22 inches. And would be able to do that. And so when we started kind of moving to that process is when I started to really hone in on the big fish tactics. And what I found was you want moving water, and you want rocks in the spring, boulder fields, big rocks, live bottom mussel beds will fish really well. So knowing what kind of bottom you're on is important. This is where side scan comes in tremendously, where it's where are those rocky bottoms where there's a lot of crustaceans that they eat, a lot of bait fish. There'll be squid around in the spring. They eat pretty much everything.
They're ravenous. They're absolutely ravenous, where they will chase down a bait. I mean, I've caught them in the surf on bottle plugs. I've caught them in the surf on live eels.
I've seen them blitzing the surface.
Yeah. So sometimes it's slack tide when they're really keyed up. They'll come up, and they are a fish that does not look designed to feed on the surface. It's kind of like an awkward, kind of frumpy looking roll when they're trying to eat the bait on the surface.
They look like they're not. So me and my brother were messing around with them again off of Katuitt. We found a pile of them, and I go, "Dave, watch this." And I dropped down. I was fishing I think 6-ounce bucktail with a really big Dormatador's Z-Man trailer on it. So we're talking about an 8-inch presentation. And again, back to the culling out the bigger fish, we had the screen lit up. It looked like lasagna. So I dropped down the bottom. As soon as it hits down, I start humping the jig back up to the top. And because I was about to reset and this happened, I go, watch this. I did it again. And like 3 sea bass came launching out of the water trying to eat the jig. And all of them like looked at each other and was like, we're not supposed to be up here. And they just froze. They looked like the blocks from Super Mario Brothers that used to drop from the ceiling in the Koopa Trooper. They were just like, they looked so stupid, but it was awesome. The people at Z-Man Fishing have been dedicated to ignoring the book on traditional lure making, instead setting out to create truly category-defining lures, soft baits, and jig systems that simply catch fish. At Z-Man, authentic innovation remains a badge of honor, recognized and admired by countless fans worldwide. I'm one of those fans. I fish countless Z-Man products in both fresh and salt, from their chatterbaits to their soft plastics made from a material they call Elastec. Some of the most naturally acting, durable soft baits I've ever fished. I've caught PBs on their smallest baits, like on a massive brown trout, choked a micro finesse TRD while targeting smallies, to hooking giant tarpon and redfish on their diesel minnows, which are also phenomenal striper baits. The best part is, when bluefish show up, they'll hold up to them too. Give them a look at zmanfishing.com or ask for them at your local shop.
So I'm guessing most of the people listening to this podcast know what a black sea bass looks like, but it's if you haven't, it's kind of it's almost grouper-like, where it's a classic like bass shape, except the fins are much bigger on them. They've got really long fins that kind of flow in the water, especially the males, like their pectoral fin and their tail. That's one thing when you're measuring a black sea bass, the tails have a long filament at the top that sometimes can be 2-3 inches long. So they say when you're measuring them, that filament does not count. You know, they've got really sharp, really sharp dorsal fins, and when those are opened up, it does have these white striations in there.
Yeah, and so spots, and they're so cool.
They're really cool looking fish. They've got a big mouth. You can lip them like a bass, but it is like a striper, but it is a little bit sharper, their teeth. So they'll actually saw through your thumb a lot faster than a striper will.
Yeah, hands get pretty messed up when you're culling through a bunch of sea bass. So, you know, kind of back to those big fish tactics. For me, it was always, you know, a bigger jig to get that bigger profile. And the problem with fishing a big jig is at like 5 and 6 ounces, it almost looks unnatural in the water column when you don't have a tremendous amount of tide. You're fishing boulder fields. There is water sweeping through them. You want to have a natural presentation. So I always relied on a teaser to kind of slow the drop down a little bit. The number 2 biggest tip that I can give you, well, I guess it would be 3. I would say focus on the boulder fields and the live bottom over the wrecks in the spring. This doesn't apply to those down in Jersey that are fishing in the wintertime in, you know, a few hundred feet of water.
This is more specific to like shallow water sea bassing, say less than 40 feet, sometimes less than 30 feet in Massachusetts.
20 to 30 feet is kind of that sweet spot for me. Yeah, you can find spots in like that, you know, upper teen range that holds good sea bass in. But for me, it's always been 20 to 30 feet, rocky bottom, live bottom. So tip number 1 there. Tip number 2, upsize your offering. You don't want to go too big. A 6 ounce Spro bucktail is perfect if you have a trailer that will slow it down and present that bait naturally. Number 3, I would say, is something that I did pick up from fishing wrecks and pressured fish, because again, with that opener that comes out, like it's like a holiday, they're seeing so many baits go by their nose. And if you're just dragging your bait on the bottom and hopping it along the bottom as your boat, you know, drifts by, every bait's going in the same direction. So you got to give them a different look. We saw this with Forte on his boat, you know, on Tuesday, where as soon as we got to the wreck, you dropped down, you were tight instantly. You caught 2 or 3 fish, the boat times 4 or 5 guys on the boat. Once you drop that rig down, that you no longer got tight instantly, unless you change the direction that your jig was coming over the wreck, which in that specific wreck, you can't do that by casting in all different directions and kind of feeling over the wreck without getting snagged a bazillion times, which...
So the wreck we were fishing is it's a well enough known wreck. I'm not giving away a secret here. It's the Port Hunter wreck in Vineyard Sound, and man, you seem to have real vendetta. Actually, I think it has a vendetta against you.
I hate that place.
Based on how much tackle you lost there. You joked. You said it'd be easier just to like go there, dump a bunch of jigs in the water, and then
open your cooler and see the 3 fish that you caught when you weren't snagged.
So the port hunter was actually it was carrying, I think it was carrying railroad parts, and I've got it up now. Sheepskin jackets, woolen underwear, rubber boots, olive drab. It sank in 1918, so over 100 years ago. And
so sticky.
Yeah, it is.
It's so
one
sticky,
of
and it's not like it's all over the place. It's a mess down there.
Yeah, it was a steel freighter.
Yeah,
300. I mean, it's a big wreck, 380 feet long. I mean, so it's a lot of structure. It holds a lot of fish, but like you said, you're going to lose some jigs, and a lot of people fish it. It gets a lot of pressure.
You can find some quality fish on it. It's a good place to kind of hit real quick to see who's home, and then kind of branch out. And that's how I would use it in the past. But
one of the best parts about it too, it's close to good striper water.
It is. It definitely is. And we were blessed. We were greeted with ravenous striper schools on that trip that ended the day with topwater. Stripers to 36, 37 inches on the dock. Which who's going to complain about that? But I don't like that wreck because of the fact that once you hit it a couple times and you get those first few fish, the fishing becomes extra tough. And then I try to change things, and you have so much tide moving over that wreck that it's really hard to change the angle of your presentation without getting snagged. And I think that's why I've just given up on fishing it. And I think because of that, it led me to kind of figuring out that live bottom and boulder fields are more consistently bigger fish. You'll still find some easy drop and reel numbers at times, but when I'm going there, it's usually just to stop in a bunch of areas to work. You basically fan cast. As I was explaining, when every boat's drifting in the same direction, if you fan cast and present that jig at different angles, up current, down current, cross current, it gets bit. You get way more bites than if you're just dragging it. So when we were fishing over the Port Hunter, you noticeably saw that, hey, just dropping the jig down, and at times we were spot locked and just having it kind of moving in the current, the fish were like, nah, I know that. I'm not eating it. And we were still lit up on the screen and the bite would shut off. So they're not dumb.
I mean, that's the thing you see with these pressured spots. The other one, the biggest piece of structure in Buzzards Bay is Cleveland Ledge, or the most prominent piece of structure is Cleveland Ledge. Originally, that was named Pecasset Ledge, and then they renamed it for the president, Grover Cleveland, because it was his favorite fishing spot. So he would vacation on Cape Cod. I think he served non-consecutive terms, like the 1800s, early 1900s, I think late 1800s. But he would take the boat out to Cleveland Ledge every day, and eventually, after his second term as president, they renamed it for him.
I do like that area. Not so much the ledge, but there's some real good rocky bottom not far from that I got my second biggest.
But we can blame him for spot burning it because it's got the biggest sea bass fleet on it every spring, and sea bass move around a lot more than tog. Like tog are one of those fish that you could they're kind of homebodies. So once you clear out the keepers of a wreck, it's going to take a while for that to replenish. Sea bass do more moving around, but you can still clean out the keepers, especially when you've got a fleet of 100 boats out there and fishing that. So a lot of guys like you who are serious about getting the limits are better off trying to find some lesser known structures. Using your electronics or your local knowledge to find something that's not been hit a million times by 100 boats day after day from the beginning of the season. I was talking to Brian Coombs, Captain Brian Coombs of Get Tight Sport Fishing, and Cam Farry of Cambo Charters about their sea bass strategies for an article coming out in the June issue, which is just hitting newsstands now. And that was both of their advice. They're like, I see the fleet at Cleveland Ledge. I wave to them as I drive by, and I go to something that's smaller.
Yep.
And Brian said he likes drop-offs. He said sea bass like to feed up a slope because unlike the tog, sea bass eat everything, but they'll also chase bait around. They'll chase squid. They'll school up. They'll move after bait fish and around bait fish, sand eels, baby scup. Lobstermen, I know, hate sea bass.
Yep.
There's a lot of commercial fishermen, especially shell fishermen, do not like them. Because they are super abundant at times. They're not as abundant now as they were, say, 10 years ago. But they go through, and it's like a plague of locusts. They say they'll just leave the bottom bare. Every juvenile lobster, every small crab, the sea bass eat them. And when you cut them, that's what you see in them. You see all these small crabs. Sometimes you'll see burgalls. You see squid and things like that.
Yeah,
so.
they're ravenous. I mean, they're on the menu too. Bluefish. I've had bluefish take, half of my sea bass. But they do roam around. They do eat everything. And I love the spring fishery that we have. And I wanted to touch on kind of the timeline where, I think your best chance at catching a big spring sea bass is, right from opening day to like June 15th is kind of the sweet spot. Once the water starts to kind of push in the upper 60-degree range, they definitely move out.
They're less accessible.
Yeah.
Right now in Massachusetts, this is as close, and Rhode Island, Connecticut too.
Yep.
It's as close as they get. You have the big fish in shallow water. They're looking to spawn. They're looking to feed. And then as the water warms up, get into the fall, they push further and further offshore onto structures out there, and they're just a little bit more scattered.
Yep.
But so this, if you want your biggest sea bass of the year in New England, this is the time.
This is the best time.
In New York and New Jersey, the best time's the winter. And that's the fishing I used to do for them. Like sea bass for me growing up was we'd go out fluke fishing, and whether we wanted to or not, we were catching keeper sea bass. Like they were a constant. You would hit some wrecks. Sometimes back when the season would be open in April, you could hit some wrecks to get your first couple party boat trips into the year. You'd catch a limit of sea bass on the artificial reefs. But then if you wanted your shot at like a 5-pounder, you'd wait until the late winter. I'm talking mid-December through now. Sea bass season now closes on January 1st, but back then it would be open through the winter, and you would go on these January and February headboat trips, and you would go out 60 miles. You'd fish 220 foot of water, 250 feet of water on these deep water wrecks, and you would catch 3 and 4 pound sea bass 3 at a time. You'd put 3 hooks on because you're going to drop all that way down there. You're going, you want to come up with your 3 fish. And that is when, like, the New Jersey state record was caught on Y2K. It was a 9-pound sea bass caught on January 1st.
That's a big sea bass.
That's a really big sea bass. We did remember we did a New Year's Day trip once?
Not for sea bass, right?
No, not for sea bass, for cod.
Yeah.
But I was looking at that. You always think, like, man, like that guy skipped all the New Year's Eve celebrations and decided to go fishing. And I wish I'd done more of that. The one time we did it, we went cod fishing on New Year's Day. I think the boat left at like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah,
so
that was a fun trip.
And we loaded
I wanted
them.
to do the wreck sea bass thing. I've never done that before, and the quality is impressive from what you see in the fishing reports from those boats.
And it just gets, what happens is all these sea bass, and they think that there's 2 different stocks of sea bass. You have the South Atlantic stock, which is, I think, from like North Carolina south into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, they kind of drop off on the western delta of the Mississippi. So Louisiana has some fish. The Keys have some sea bass, which I didn't realize.
Yeah, you can get them in deep water.
Yeah.
And they don't move around as much. They're not as migratory. Our fish, which they call the Mid-Atlantic stock, they do a lot more moving around. So a lot of these big fish we have in close to shore off Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Rhode Island, those are the ones you're seeing on the wrecks in 220 feet of water throughout the winter. And you see those bigger fish, and they're all concentrated because they go further, find more favorable conditions, and they kind of get concentrated as the structure gets less and less.
They ultimately spawn out there, right? Like I thought I read earlier today that they actually release their eggs based on the water temperature offshore, and the eggs don't venture. The eggs hatch, and they venture inshore once they reach at like a half an inch, and then that tiny sea bass will end up in the estuaries until it gets to a certain size, and it will kind of fall in line. My
understanding is that they spawn. They might spawn in the winter down south, but here they're spawning now. They're spawning in May and April. That's why they're in their spawning colors. You catch them in the middle of the winter, and they're kind of that flat, brown black color.
Yeah.
Whereas now they have that electric blue through them. So it depends on where you're fishing them. The spawn, I think I read, could happen anywhere from January to July, but being at the northern end of the range here,
that makes sense.
I mean, they range as far north as. Originally it was Cape Cod.
Nova Scotia, I read.
Yep, but now they're seeing more and more of them further north. And going back to Captain Brian Coombs, he did a study with, I want to say New England Aquarium. I'm not sure who it was with, but he went out and they wanted to tag sea bass north out of Boston, and he said, man, they could have filled the boat. They had X amount of tags, and it was a good number. And he said, we could have filled the boat with them, and we tagged a bunch. They were all small, but they were trying to get a gauge on how the sea bass are moving around north of the Cape, because traditionally, Cape Cod was the northernmost barrier for them. Yeah. And Cape Cod functions as the kind of northernmost range of a bunch of species. Originally scup, weak fish. A
lot of pelagics.
A lot of the pelagics. So it's kind of this barrier, but now... waters are warming up. You've got the Cape Cod Canal that helps the mixing too. That more fish are traveling north. New Hampshire now has a black sea bass state record, which is originally Tim Moore, who's a fishing guide out of New Hampshire. He had it, but I think he's been beaten. It's still less than 3 pounds, the fish, so it's kind of low hanging fruit. The world record, do you know where the world record is?
Virginia Beach.
Correct, man. So that one was over 10 pounds, and this is one I know you like, because you'll submit the fish to see if you get the state pin for the biggest sea bass caught a year. But here's something you could level up. Very low hanging fruit for a sea bass record. And I'll issue the challenge to anybody who listens to this. The junior catch and release or length record, world record for sea bass, is 38 centimeters, which is only 14 inches.
What?
Yep. That's not even a keeper in Massachusetts. Here it's 16 and a half. So you couldn't even keep that fish. You could go out and catch a short sea bass and still, you have to be one of the fishing pageant dads, which you and I kind of are, trying to get our kids out fishing all the time. But we could take them out, and little Jimmy or little Anthony could go out and potentially.
My kid catches an IGFA world record before I do, that actually claims it, I'll never hear the end of it. He already thinks he's, Jason Tatum.
It's right there for the taking, dude. We could do it off the dock, 14 inches.
Let's cut that out. Let's not put that out there.
Now I want to see a change. Somebody's got to bump that up. Cool. Take their kid out, take it to a respectable size by the end of 2024. I think we'll see it. We a couple years ago ran a story on the most breakable records, and of them, there was the Northern Puffer, which was vacant. So that it was an empty category. It had a minimum size it had to be 1 pound to be eligible. And since we ran that, a guy last September, Jonathan, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Cavalieri, he caught one, and he is now the world record holder of the Northern Puffer.
What is it?
It's 1 pound, exactly. So he just made it, but I want to get him to write something up about it for the magazine. But yeah, there's plenty of ways to sneak your way into the IGFA Book of World Records. So, but that's one right there. Somebody has to break the junior length record.
I would have had the all tackle length record for Barracuda if there was a tape long enough on Cody Rubin's boat.
That's right. That was a big fish.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, the spirit of it is catch and release.
It was released. I couldn't control what Flipper decided to do.
Yeah. Well, Cheech caught an enormous Barracuda, let it go, and the fish was regaining his strength, and a dolphin came in and just absolutely T-boned it.
Yeah.
And
it blew our minds. I was with Kevin Blinkoff and Cody Rubner, and we watched it all play out. And that thing was just a dinosaur. We were joking that, by the time we come back down there for ICAST to fish with him, there's going to be like a coral erected statue of me riding a dolphin down there, because I liberated an entire wreck by taking the apex predator out with the help of the dolphin. That thing was crazy. Family owned and operated for over 65 years, AFCO represents unparalleled quality, performance, and reliability when it counts most. From inventing the roller guide to introducing the world's first pair of true fishing shorts, which are some of the most comfortable shorts you'll ever own, by the way. AFCO not only delivers products proven to perform on the water, but are true leaders of conservation as well. Their pledge to protect and conserve has 10% of your AFCO purchases going directly to supporting conservation initiatives. Beyond their fishing shorts, a couple of my personal favorites are the Barricade Elite bibs and jacket, as well as their line of Reaper sweatshirts, pullovers, and jackets. Check them out at AFCO.com. AFCO, any fish, any water.
So we got a little side. We were talking about the winter sea bass fishing. So I would do that. I remember my first trip was on the Big Jamaica, and I brought an old Penn GTI conventional. And they were kind of their mid-tier conventionals at the time. Guys liked them for wire line jigging. They weren't ideal for just cranking up, a pound of weight and then 3 sea bass on the end. By the end of that, the reel was completely shot. I had a cooler full of sea bass. That was the first time I saw guys using electric reels. And a lot of them were improvised. I mean, they would replace the reel handle with a drill bit, and they had an electric drill they would just jam in there to get their sea bass to the surface. Those trips are really cool because you have some crazy bycatch on them. You can see cod, you can see pollock, you can see. I know that's not crazy bycatch up here in New England, but for me in Jersey, like those were exotic species back then to me, and. A lot of times in the winter, you would have these big makos that would kind of haunt those wrecks.
Really?
And people would, every once in a while, a mako would come up and take somebody for a ride. They'd grab one of their sea bass. Weak fish actually winter over at a lot of those deep wrecks. So that's not a bad way to gauge how the weak fish season's going to be. Is you look at the winter headboat trips and you're like, are they catching weak fish? Like, oh, they are. Like, when they come in shore, maybe it's going to be a good year. And what was some of the other bycatch? Bluefish.
Yeah.
Like the sea bass, they'd get the barotrauma where, their swim bladder would explode and they push their stomach out of their mouth by the time you get them. So they're very tough to release out of that deep water. So you really only want to target them when you can keep them. Of all the fish that you catch out there, the one fish that seemed to be affected least by the barotrauma, by coming up from 200 feet down and the pressure change, was bluefish. They came up fighting, ready to take a finger. And then if you put them back, they'd go swim right back down to the bottom.
They're warriors, man.
I love blues.
Yeah.
We got to do one of these on bluefish.
We will.
But yeah, that was the sea bass fishing there. And then when I moved up here, it kind of blew my mind that you could catch them like from shore and close to shore in Jersey. The only ones you ever saw in tight were the little ones, the little juvenile ones. You would catch them off the dock. I would catch a ton of them.
Scup fishing or something.
Yep. And you catch decent ones, fluke fishing in close, but just keepers, none of these big hump heads. And then I came up here and they're like, oh yeah, you can do 4-pound sea bass in 20 feet of water. And to me, like, I love light tackle.
Yeah.
So you just described you're using 5-ounce jigs, giant things. I wanted to use the lightest thing I could get down there on the lightest rod I could get away with, because these are fish that they fight really hard, but on the broomsticks that you would take out on those winter party boat wreck trips, you're not getting the full show from the sea bass.
I didn't have the appreciation that I grew to have for sea bass when I first started fishing them down here. I was probably in my early 20s, and somebody's like, want to go sea bass fishing? I was like, what's a sea bass? We didn't have them in Boston Harbor. And he's like, come on, we'll go. And we went, and we went right to the Port Hunter. And I was like, you're basically fishing with big conventional. So over time, I ended up kind of scaling way down. I fish them with a 3K reel. Spinning reel is my favorite. I like, if I'm going to bucktail, I like a really stout spinning rod. I've used like my freshwater Mojo bass that I would throw jigs on for largemouth, which has the backbone to drive a hook home on a 2 or 3 ounce jig that you're bouncing along the bottom. And that is like, that kind of setup is what I like. Now that I do a lot more fan casting for them, I opt for a longer spinning rod, but it has to have the backbone. If you want to do like the slow pitch stuff with like a slow pitch jigging rod, you can't do the bucktailing with that, because it's got so much give in that rod that you're not going to drive the hook home, and you shake off so many probably quality fish doing that. In that application, stick to what that rod was made for. Tie on a slow pitch jig, and you'll still catch them. So that's kind of the setup I've favored over the years and kind of switched over to. I typically fish 20-pound to 30-pound braid, and I'll go as light as 15-pound leader. But if I'm on the wrecks, obviously you want to scale that up. Jimmy, you've done a lot of sea bassing from your kayak. Walk us through that kind of a process.
So, yeah, my progression in sea bass fishing was, at first I thought had to use bait. Then I stopped using bait, started using gulp on bucktails, and now these days I just bring diamond jigs or the heavier, like epoxy style jigs. The Game On XO is a really good one because that's pretty heavy. It gets down fast. And I'm using no bait. Part of the reason there is you're going to catch less scup, fewer porgies.
Yep.
You're still going to catch some. You're going to catch fewer sea robins, but you're still going to catch some. And the big sea bass are kind of in that predatory mode. They have no problem chasing that down. You're trying to show them a big offering to get the biggest of the big. When I'm in the kayak, like, it's just whatever I can reach.
You can still catch a tank of a sea bass on a piece of squid on a double dropper loop. Don't get me wrong, but like And the same thing goes for the old tried and true diamond jig, or any of the metals that you would fish. So, you can really simplify things. That's what's so nice about them. They're accessible, and it's something that you can take a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they can just have an absolute blast doing.
But having those big sea bass in kayak range is kind of unique to Cape Cod. There's not a ton of places down south I know that you can go and catch 4-pound sea bass or a limit of 4-pound sea bass from the kayak.
Yeah.
Now, that's definitely getting harder. More guys have caught on to it, and the sea bass population itself is kind of
on a downward cycle for sure.
Yeah,
right?
it's definitely on a downward cycle. The fishing's getting harder, and it's at the point where a kayak that would give me a little extra range to hit some different spots, like the EPDL from Old Town.
Yeah,
that would be something that would help me then get back on the good sea bass fishing. Right now, I'm just fishing the town hole with all the other, with 2 dozen other kayak
with
guys.
Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Yeah, Tom, Dick, and Kevin Blinkoff, and we're catching what's there, and that fishing's gotten tougher. But it's still worth a couple trips every year. But now, my best sea bass fishing happens on the boat.
There's sea bass always seems to have a lot of fanfare around early season tournaments and stuff. You fished them with Chris Parisi in the past out of Kingman, right?
Yeah, I don't think I ever weighed a sea bass in before that tournament. I never weighed one. Period. So I'd look at them and I would eyeball it, like, wow, it's got to be a 6-pounder. And they look so much bigger than they actually weigh. But we went on the boat that day, and he goes, all right, we are not keeping anything under 4 pounds. I was like, no problem. I catch nothing but 6-pounders. So we catch one, and I'm looking at him like, wow, here we go. Let's see how much over 6 is this. He puts it on, it's 3.9.
They look bigger than they weigh.
They look way bigger than they are. I mean, they are just, the yield on them, when you clean them, isn't that great. It's not, a fluke is almost 75%.
There's a big difference between a barely keeper and a 23, 24-inch sea bass.
But if you're going to go percentage-wise, the fillet percentage of a sea bass is probably, I would put it in terms of total weight, I want to say 45%.
Yeah.
Whereas a fluke, it's probably closer to 60%. Tuna is probably 80%. But
they have that weird rib cage that makes the fillet odd-shaped.
Yeah, I wish I really want to get to party boat mate status where I am just taking the maximum amount of meat off there in less time.
Yeah.
Right now, I kind of have to. I take my time with it. I'm getting into the groove now. I caught a lot of fish the other day, so you do have to. You're a little rusty at first, and then you hit your
absolutely
hit your stride. So finding fish over that 4-pound minimum size was not easy, but we did. And I think the biggest fish we had was 4.9, and the smallest one was 4.5, and that was enough to win it.
Nice.
And the difference that we did is the other people went, a lot of the other guys in the tournament, I think, went and caught their limit, and it was the first 4 fish they caught, and then they were done. They went on to, there were some other aspects of the tournament, stripers and I think bluefish. And we were Chris Parisi, who now works with Folsom and Tsunami, he said, we were winning the sea bass one. And it was Kevin Blinkoff, and Chris, the 3 of us in the boat. And we did. We demolished the next team in that sea bass tournament. And he'd made it up to be this is the Bassmaster Classic of black sea bass fishing. And he goes, I pulled together my elite team. We are doing this. We're winning it this year. We won by 8 pounds over a father-son team where they're sorry, son, the kid was crying. I'm like, what is it? I just kind of slinked away. I'm like, Chris, this isn't there's no fanfare or girls in bikinis handing us a giant check. This is just a family barbecue that we somehow ruined for everybody. But there are some more real deal sea bass tournaments you were going to talk about.
Yeah, one of the ones coming up that a couple of my buddies run are it's put on by the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. It's June 7th through the 9th, and it benefits Josh's Boots, which it's on brand with Memorial Day, and proceeds benefiting a veteran charity in Josh's Boots, which is awesome. I did fish it last year with my buddy Fronius, who is the guru of sea bass fishing, because he wouldn't listen to a damn thing that I said, and we caught nothing but dinks all day.
That was sarcasm. You were being
definitely
sarcastic.
sarcasm. He was.
Yeah, I noticed. You did a little captaining the captain the other day. Cheech, he thinks very highly of himself as a black sea bass fisherman.
Is my spirit fish. Like I am one with the sea bass.
A bottom feeder,
and I'm respectful. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, listen, sea bass is different for everybody. I literally posted kind of that like tip, rocks not wrecks in the spring, and Forte pings me on direct message, and he goes, "I'm sorry, we should have fished rocks," and I didn't mean it like that.
It's as if we didn't limit out within 90 minutes.
That's what I mean. Everybody has a different approach to sea bass fishing, and for a lot of people, it's let's go get a limit, and then we'll move on to like chasing stripers, or then we'll go do this or go do that.
But you're chasing down the biggest of the big sea bass while they're in shallow on light tackle, which is I get. It's a pursuit.
Cool with the spring is you can have both. You definitely can have both. Like I've gone on those big. Like I'm gonna catch a 7-pound sea bass today. Like that would be my goal to try to level things up to a new pound class, and we would have been able to catch our limit in the first hour of the morning if we didn't kind of impose our own regulations. So you can still find the numbers. But it's not always like that. It will be like that earlier in the spring, and they get a little bit more sparse as the spring moves on.
Yeah, but you can still find good black sea bass fishing in New England in the midsummer. Like that's something where it closes in, I think, early September here in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
So I think usually around the 9th or something like that.
But you can still find keepers. Like they have saved Albie days for me.
They have saved tuna days for me.
Yeah. So that's right. Especially you get on the backside of Noman's Land Island, which is an island south of Martha's Vineyard. It's a great structure there, and the sea bass pile in there in the late summertime. If you're used to making a 1-mile run in Buzzards Bay for them, a 20-mile run seems a little bit crazy.
Ridiculous.
When there's so much else going on in August or September, but as a plan B or a day saver or a let's top off the cooler on the way in from a bigger trip, it's a great opportunity.
It is. I mean, that's where all our fish that are right now real close to shore end up. It's basically that first drop behind, whether it's the Vineyard or Noman's, and probably the same for Block. I've never sea bassed out there, but I would imagine so.
We got a limit when we did the at the rail trip on the Gale Francis
out in the windmill farms there. But that's where the biomass of fish end up moving to, and then ultimately they drop off even deeper as the winter progresses. I've caught them trolling for bonito at behind the Vineyard.
That shows you how much they can throw on the afterburners. I mean, you typically troll for bonito. You're trying to troll fast enough to outpace bluefish. Yeah. That's the goal of bonito trolling.
5-6 knots.
And every once in a while you get a knockdown, and it's fighting real funny, and it turns out and they're always big.
Dude,
they're
I
always
always
big
mark that spot because after I, catch the bonito, or if I don't, I'll go back there and jig sea bass and be like, hey, we're here anyways. Why not?
Yeah. All right, Cheech. So we talked about why they're fun to catch, why they're worth targeting, looking for a big one. But the main reason most people go sea bass fishing is for that meal at the end of the day. And so you're a much more elaborate and you're way better cook than I am. But so I want to hear some of your sea bass. What do you do with it? You don't just do you do fry them, but you don't just.
I do everything with them. Like they're one of my favorite fish to eat. So sashimi, just straight raw, they're awesome. I kind of move around. Like I've done everything from like if I have some left over as sea bass season is approaching, if I do end up making it through the winter with some, I'll make fish cakes with them. And that's kind of one of my like low key favorite things to be like, oh, well, there's some old sea bass in the freezer. And what I'll do is I'll make a fish cake with some like, bell pepper in there and some onion and some herbs and breading and just a typical fish cake, right? And then what I'll do is I'll get a nice crisp on it. I'll put that in the bowl first, and then I'll take I'll put a dropped egg on it and make like a sea bass fish cake, eggs Benedict, which is one of my favorite breakfasts ever. It is so good.
There's a restaurant near here, Munakis Cafe, that does that.
Munakis?
Yeah, I knew you were going to correct me on how I pronounce it. It's absolutely.
I just love giving Jim crap about everything he pronounces, Mr. Scallop.
but they do that. They do like the fish cake eggs Benedict,
Yeah.
and that's like the best breakfast going. And to make use of fish that's been at the bottom of your freezer, maybe
Yep.
a little freezer burnt.
That's
Fish
a great
cakes
way to
are
do
the
it.
best way to go.
Right when you get back in, if you're not going to go the sashimi route, then, you know, just literally either panko or breadcrumb sauteed in butter. You can't beat that. It's so good. But I really love doing it francaise, where you basically season your fish fillets, make sure there's no bones in them. And one of the most annoying things is when you're getting in the groove cutting fish, you nick off some of the vertebrae towards the back that have these little circular bones. Like, pick those things out, because there's nothing worse than getting one of those when you're eating a breaded fillet. But you bread it in flour, or you coat it in flour after you season it, obviously. And then you get a hot pan, some butter and olive oil, and you dredge it in egg, and it goes into the egg, right into the pan. And you want that egg to, you know, solidify, scramble, basically. As soon as it hits the pan, you flip it. And then what I'll do is I'll take some linguine or something, and once I get my fish cooked, I'll take it out, put it, you know, in a plate to rest. I usually have like a baking dish in the oven with some tin foil, and I'll put it on that once I get the oil off of it, and the temperature's like 200 degrees just to keep it warm. And the pasta's done. I'll just go like butter, white wine, and a bunch of lemon juice, and then something to thicken it, whether it's flour or whatever. And a lot of times I'll add capers to give it a little, you know, extra, you know, kick, I guess, or a flavor pop. Then I'll put the fish back in, cover it with the sauce, and put the sauce and everything over the pasta. And then I'll, you know, at the very end, I'll hit it with a bunch of parsley, and when the sauce is going, I'll take a lemon and just slice it in rounds, and it makes for an awesome presentation that looks great. It is phenomenal because you get the lemon, you get the breaded egg battered fish, the pasta, and that like white wine lemon sauce is just killer. I forgot white wine. You need that.
So what I did with the fish the other night. Oh, wait, going back. You mentioned like taking the bones out. Some people have major issues with fish bones. Like when they get one, it ruins the rest of the meal for them.
My wife that's a deal breaker for her.
So I messed up. I gave my daughter a piece of the fish we caught earlier this week, and there was a bone in it, and like that was it. She couldn't eat another one.
Yeah.
And it's something that never bothers Andy Nebreski. He's
me.
like, see, I like, you spit it out and you move on, dude.
I pretend
like
it didn't
watermelon
happen
seeds.
now. Like but I don't want to ruin the rest of the meal. But like, I used to always hate that too. And
Why?
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
My good friend Jerry, I messed up cleaning crappies once, and he swallowed a bone, and like he had to go to he like got stuck in his throat, and yeah, maybe I'm just Mara had one, Jerry had one. Maybe I'm just not good at cutting fish, but it doesn't bother me. But I know
to
a lot
have
of
the
people.
fillets that you cut for me.
Yeah,
You know?
well, they're upstairs in the fridge. But what I did with the fish was, and this was a recipe that Andy's put on our website. We can link that in the description here. And it's just the fried fish sandwich. It basically is an elevated version of the McDonald's filet of fish,
Yep.
where you have the slice of cheese always on the bottom roll, buttered roll, and then like extra crunchy fish. Like he rolls it. Andy's recipe has you taking the fish, putting it in crushed saltine crackers, then the egg wash, then panko, then frying it, then putting it on the bun.
You're gonna put it in the fridge before you fry it. That is a pro tip right there.
There you go. Yeah, put it in the fridge for at least 15 minutes.
Yep.
Ideally about an hour,
Keeps
and
the
that's going to
breading
help
on
it
better.
stick on there
Yep.
better. It does. It does definitely make a difference. And then a spicy remoulade sauce, which is and they were fantastic. I had 2 of them, and then the half that Mar didn't eat after she got the fish bone, so 2.5.
I don't know what to do now with these. So, like, one of my all-time, like, you know, showstopper, easy meals to make was one that Andy first made called cebolada. And it's Cebolada. And if
Portuguese
you look
dish,
up
yeah.
fish cebolada, I heard my grandfather talking about it. And when Andy brought it up, I go, I've actually heard that. It is very Portuguese. And it is phenomenal. Everybody I've ever given any of that to is like, oh my goodness.
Describe it. What is it? Tomato base?
Basically,
What?
the star. It is not. It is kind of more in the casserole realm. So you get like a Dutch oven, you know, like a real heavy ceramic pot, and you cook down onions for a really long time, get them really caramelized and whatever. You put some tomato paste in there, some stewed tomatoes, and the spice comes from basically hot pepper relish. All right. Like sambal oelek or something like that. A little bit of lemon, I think, to finish it. There's some parsley. Again, the recipe's on onthewater.com. And it's just this tomatoey onion base, and it's great over roasted potatoes. It's just, once you get that sauce kind of done, and it probably takes a good hour to do it right.
I thought you said it was easy.
It is easy. The cooking, it's easy. It's one of those things where you kind of set it and forget it, and then when it's ready, all you do is you take your seasoned fish and you lay it on top of a glass casserole dish. You spoon a little bit of the sauce, but leave some fish exposed so you can get that nice little flame-kissed crusty edges on it. You lay the fillets over that bed of sablata, and you throw the broiler on for like the last 2 minutes. So you cook the fish in it, and all the juices from the fish permeates that base of a sauce. And then, you take the casserole out, serve it over, whatever you want to serve it with. I like roasted potatoes for that one. And the flavor is just so intense and has so much depth. It's phenomenal.
I'm very big on the to take what you just described in this delicious involved thing. My go-to is rolling them around in crushed up junk food, and then
dude, I came across a little gem that I discovered in the pantry yesterday that was Old Bay flavored goldfish, and you were the first person that I was like, I got to take a picture of this and send it to Jim because he's
did you
going to want
buy
me
it
to
and bring it in for me?
No, I don't even know how it got there. My wife said, "Oh, look what I found," and I'm like, "Oh," she's like, "You use Old Bay all the time." I'm like, "Yeah, this might be what Jimmy needs to coat his fish in."
It is. So I've done Captain Crunch, which is very good.
Ridiculous.
I have done, no, try it. You've got to salt it. You got to put some pepper in there because otherwise it's just too sweet. But it's a corn-based cereal. Everyone knows what Captain Crunch tastes like. And you put a lot of salt, a lot of pepper in there, and it's fantastic. I dare you to try it and not tell me it's also good. It. All right, I will make it then.
Not wasting my time cooking with Captain Crunch cereal.
But potato chip crusted, another one that's a classic. Dude,
yeah.
You could do crushed up, if you have a hard cornbread, like a kind of a dry cornbread, you could do it with that. I've actually done goldfish because that was like an attempt to get my kids into eating
goldfish with the Old Bay would be.
I'm sure it's fantastic.
Great. Yeah. Do you like the goldfish and crusted fish?
It was all right. I did it more for the kids. They're like, we love goldfish. I was like, how about goldfish and real fish? And to trick them into eating fish. I need another fish eater in the house. Brutal. And because Pam, my wife, doesn't eat fish, and I bring home the fish and I want to make this meal and share it. That's the best part. Yeah. There's nothing worse than making a nice elaborate meal and then sitting alone and eating it while they all eat hot dogs.
Dude, I'm so sick of it. You have to make 2 and 3 meals sometimes now that you have a family. It's like, I want to eat seafood the way I want to eat it. My wife only eats fried seafood. So it's like, come on. It's a pain in the ass.
But anyhow,
I want to keep going on some recipes.
No, there's nothing worse than watching two fat guys talk about what they're going to eat soon. Remember when we did the fried fish?
That never even saw the light of day.
It never saw the light of day, but let me describe it. Last year, I think it was in 2023, we had an idea. We're we're going to review all the fast food fried fish sandwiches and do the review on the podcast. It's going to be me, Andy, and you. And so we went around and bought the Wendy's sandwich, the Burger King sandwich, the McDonald's one, and then we sat there and reviewed it. But we realized midway into this, we've never reviewed food before. So we're all right, now we're going to try the McDonald's one. 5 minutes of just chewing sounds. And we're pretty good.
Dude, it was like a scene from Angry Birds when the green pigs were getting ready to eat the birds.
So we just... we showed the draft of the video and the podcast to Kevin. He goes, "This isn't anything. This is just 3 guys eating lunch." So we scrapped it. It never saw the light of day. Maybe someday we'll bring it up in a blooper. But let's end it on that note.
No, let's not end it on that note. One of the best ways to do sea bass is whole fried sea bass, Asian style, with getting that nice crisp on it and doing that ginger soy based sauce. That is absolutely to die for. It's not hard to prepare.
I haven't done it because I feel like it's kind of an expert level presentation.
It's all about oil control. If you end up with a nice fry on the outside of the fish, you want to get some sort of coating. I like cornstarch, but you can't overcook it. And if you undercook it, it's like ruined. It's terrible, right? So
you said you can't overcook it, meaning like it's difficult to overcook. Is that what you're trying to say?
What happens is like the best part is the crispy outside of the fish. If you go way over, that becomes super burnt. If you're too hot, you kind of have to get it so that the oil's always bubbling, but it's not going to burn it before the rest of the fish cooks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've had tremendous whole fish.
It's the best.
But I've never done it myself. It's something that I don't...
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Just, get a temperature probe and just make sure that, it's crispy and it looks good on the outside, but you're getting a good reading internally.
Do it in a deep fryer or in a wok?
I do it in a wok.
Okay.
Or in a cast iron skillet, And the only thing that stinks is I don't have a wok big enough for like that A+ like pro presentation where like I always have like the filament of the tail is like it's just like it was when it came out of the water, so ignore that. But the rest of it has so much flavor, so good.
All right, well, it's about lunchtime for us, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the On the Water Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
See you guys in a couple weeks.